So notice that Batman's actions are the same. What's different is the reaction to Batman. That's labeling theory. So, give you another example. So let's just say Hannah Rosenhasselpfeffer is on her phone, and so is Kaya. I know, big stretch. I see that they're both on their phone, but what I do is say, Jenna, good student, A student, and walk by her to tell her to get off her phone.
That happens a lot to me, actually.
Very good. Okay. And it can work both ways. And here's an example. I've labeled her good kid, so her behavior is irrelevant. Because of my label, I see her actions as perfectly acceptable, but I've labeled Kaya, and I haven't done this, but let's just pretend that I've labeled you bad kid. You see their behavior is the same. What's different? My reaction. I also call this the Reggie Larson rule. Reggie Larson is our esteemed leader's son, right? He's the football coach at New Richmond, right? That's him. When he was a student here, he would be in the hallways all the time. And this was back in the good old days when classes started and ended for everyone at the same time, right? So I'd go to the hallway and say, Reggie, why aren't you in class? And keep walking, right? And then I'd walk in here like, that's Reggie. And then Tony, whoever Tony is, some other kid. Hey, Tony, how come you're not in class? Haha, no, seriously, Tony, why aren't you in class? And then I would run to my computer and I'd look up Tony. All right, Tony, you're supposed to be in algebra. Let's go. And I would escort Tony. Why? Because I labeled Reggie, good kid, and I labeled Tony, bad kid. And again, that can work both ways. I don't need hands here, but how many of you have been the beneficiary of labeling? You're labeled good kid, so you've gotten away with stuff. Thank you for raising your hand, even though I told you not to, but that's fine. You lost an assignment. You lost an assignment. Your neighbor lost an assignment, but because you're good kid, the teacher believes your excuse. And because your neighbor is bad kid, no, you're getting a 0, right? It's labeled. Labeling is the difference. The behavior is the same. The reaction is different. Yes, dear. Okay. So this is in red, which means don't bother writing it down. But why is it that some people are viewed as criminal where others aren't? Because they're the right fill in the blank. Because they're the right skin color. I mean, think about this. If you had a group, that's an example. If you had a group of people that were armed and resistant to federal authorities that are accumulating, coming to get them, are those people bad people? They're armed, and here come the federal authorities to remove them of their guns. Are those people bad people? Okay, so you're saying no, and that's kind of interesting because now what if I told you, well, this group is a drug cartel, and they're armed to the teeth, and the federal authorities are the DEA agents? Let's say, yeah. So the drug cartel with weapons that are legally obtained, Ian's like, let him go.
Well, if there's no proof connecting them to any crime,
I feel better. Okay, let's say it's a black street gang and they're armed, and here come the cops. Suddenly, when I give you that little nugget, some of you are like, oh. But what if it's a group that is occupying a storage facility in a national park in Oregon, which happened a couple years ago, right? A group of whites, they were white people, occupied a park warehouse. It was in a national park. And here come the cops. And droves of Americans said, why don't you just leave them alone? What'd they do? Well, how come those Americans defended that group that was illegally occupying a federal building? It was a storage facility. But those same people would look at a black street gang and say, thugs, What's the difference? The behavior is the same. The difference is, and of course I'm stereotyping here, but that's okay. We can stereotype sometimes. The difference is, well, those people are the wrong skin color. And those people are the right skin color. Yes, dear.
Does it really depend on who's like judging them though? Right?
Of course. Oh yeah, that's the point of labeling is who's the one observing the behavior. You know, I might see, you know, Zach, I'm a big fan of Zach. So Zach is, let's say Zach is playing a solitaire game. I would say, hey, Zach, quit it. But if Maisie here was on, detention, I'll see you in a live and learn, or love and learn, or live and learn, lunch and learn. That's it. I've done a lot of them.
Love and learn.
Okay. This is the definition. The definition of labeling theory is this black bullet right there. The focus is on the reaction, not the action. It's the focus of the person in authority. It focuses on the reaction of the teacher or the cop or the parent, right? How many of you have brothers or sisters and you know that you're the favorite, that you get away with stuff, or the other way around, you know you're not the favorite, that your brother's sister gets away with everything and you don't get away with anything, even though the behavior is the same. Labeling. Okay? And what is it? What is it about you that gets you that favorable or not favorable treatment? You know, one of you says something and the rest of the class laughs. Well, if I'm the teacher and I like you, I've labeled you good kid, I join in the laughter. But if I'm not a fan of yours, you just annoyed me, right? The behavior's the same. The reaction is what's different. Now, I like to think that I'm fans of all of you, so I don't have people that annoy me.
Are you not?
Am I a fan of yours?
Of everybody, like equally.
I think so. Well, I don't know what equally, but
Like, there's some people more than others.
well, that's human nature, isn't it? But I like to think that every day, even if one day you're like annoying me, I hope I try one day later, fresh start. Right? You and I are on a fresh start. Good luck. Who are we? Who's the game against? Is it a girls hockey game? It's Chisago? Is it at Chisago?
Yeah. Good luck, Maisie.
I've got family up there. My brother-in-law is a teacher up there, so please beat them. Because when they beat our boys team, he rubbed it in.
Come on.
I can't understand you with a popsicle in your mouth. Oh yeah, that'll be the difference. That Hershey bar. Make sure.
What?
Hershey bar.
All right.
That extra burst of speed. Okay.
Okay.
All right, very good. Our last theory is something called conflict theory. And a conflict theory is going to make the argument that our criminal justice system is racist. Okay. Now, you can accept this argument based on the evidence that I provide to you, or you could say, nah, I don't think so. And either way is fine. So let's just look at some statistics that are kind of interesting. Again, conflict theory argues that it's the reason some people commit crimes is because our criminal justice system identifies them as the wrong race, the wrong culture, and as a result, they are punished. What evidence is there? Well, let's just take a look at some of these statistics. So according to the FBI, less than 1% of white men are imprisoned right now, less than 1%. So 1 out of every 106, that's less than 1%. All men that are in prison, it jumps to 2%, which means if white men are less than 1%, but all men are more than 2%, that means that non-white men are more heavily represented, which doesn't necessarily mean that our criminal justice system is racist. These are just observations, nothing sinister here yet. Let's keep going. The third category, Hispanic men, 1 in every 36. That's about 3%. 1%, 2%, 3%, 1 out of every 36 Hispanic men. Let's go to black men. Black men ages 18 or older, 1 in 15. That's about 7%. 7% of all black men ages 18 or over are in prison right now. Let's keep going. Black men ages 20 to 30, black men ages 1. Black men ages 20 to 34, 1 in 9. That's over 10, that's about 12%. 12% of black men ages 20 to 34 right now are in prison. You're telling me that black men commit that level of crime, that white men only commit less than 1% of crimes, and white men represent about 51% of the population. Whites represent still over half of the American population. We're still over half for a little while longer. We still have it. It's not going to last. And that blacks that are about 10% of the population commit over 10% of the crimes. That it just seems statistically unlikely. So now what we have to do is figure out, well, why? What is it about blacks that makes their behavior criminalized and whites not criminalized? And this theory has some arguments here. And the argument goes like this. It's because whites are in power, that they define what's a crime. And so I've got an example here of behavior that means that whites engage in it, makes it not a crime, but blacks engage in it, it's a crime. For example, drug use. The number one most addictive drug on earth is sugar. And yet it's perfectly legal. Caffeine has just as many health detriments as marijuana. But it's legal. It's legal. Other drugs, cocaine, crack, marijuana, are illegal. Well, why? What is it? Is it the side effects themselves? And the argument, remember now, it's not me making this argument. This is the argument being made by this theory, goes like this. The reason that some things are legal is because white people like it. And the reason why some things are illegal is because other races like it. And so we want to criminalize those things because whites don't necessarily use it. Why isn't meth legal? Yeah. I think you're exactly right to point that out, because meth is a white person drug, pretty popular in rural white America, meth houses. And poor white Americans are so good at making it. It's so safe, and you never see them blow houses down or anything. That used to be a huge problem here, actually. It has become less so. I think it's still a factor, but it's much, much less prevalent. That's because law enforcement has become pretty good at making it difficult to acquire the things you need to make meth. See episodes of Breaking Bad. Okay. The end. I'm done. Any questions? Great.
I don't know if it's like a true fact, but my mom was telling me that in countries where like drugs aren't like, where you're not like punished to prison for like drugs, or where they're like legal, like that like crime rates are actually lower.
Yeah. I don't know if that's true or not. I can tell you that what they observed what happened in Colorado